I know I say this a lot, but one of the greatest things about Batman's rogues gallery is how the villains represent aspects of his personality. The Riddler represents unchecked intellect, two-faced duality, and perhaps the most literal reflection of Batman is the Man-Bat. Where Bruce Wayne adopted the guise of a creature of the night, Kirk Langstrom used science to become one. Every version of the character has taken a different approach, and when The Batman reinvented him in 2004, it didn't try to humanize the monster. It presented him in a more villainous light, as a man who wanted to become the Knight. But before I get to that, it's important to look back at the earlier versions of Man-Bat to help illustrate how the Batman's take differed to what had come before. We were introduced to Man-Bat in Detective Comics number 400, published in 1970. Here, Kirk Langstrom was an ambitious scientist who wanted powers to rival Batman, and so he synthesized a formula derived from bats. Later comics retconned his motivations to him wanting to cure deafness, which is a more sympathetic motivation, and keep that in mind for later on. Initial results were promising. He developed sonar vision and his hearing dramatically improved, but before long he started to transform into the Man-Bat. At first he was desperate for a cure, but as his condition progressed, Langstrom started to fade into the background, and the Man-Bat took over. The creature relished its existence and wanted to share it with Langstrom's fiancée, Francine. The two were soon wed, Man-Bat and She-Bat. They obviously weren't thinking clearly, so Batman intervened, injecting them both with an antidote he had created. But that wasn't the end of Man-Bat or She-Bat. After being targeted by a sorcerer who wanted to control them, yeah, I know, it's comics, Man-Bat turned to heroism, somehow shedding his feral nature, and became a private investigator. This idea was eventually dropped, however, and Man-Bat returned to his more feral status as a slathering enemy of Batman. That initial conflict between intellect and instinct, between a man of science and the animal within, became the central motif of the character. Man-Bat's very first on-screen adaptation came in Batman the Animated Series' On Leather Wings, which first aired in 1992. Rather than being a scientist that dreamed of being a hero, there Langstrom was an addict. He didn't care about saving others or rivaling Batman. All he wanted was the euphoria of becoming something else. Intelligence sharpens awareness of yourself, of the world, of everything wrong and out of place. That awareness can be exhausting and at times unbearable. For Langstrom, his transformation offered a moment where the noise lessened, the edges blurred, and his self stopped analysing, and he just simply was. It's a very human reinterpretation, turning a monster movie premise into a story about chemical dependence and escape. Batman intervened to save Langstrom, but he struggled with his addiction from then on. When his wife Francine was inadvertently infected with the Man-Bat serum and she terrorized Gotham, everyone assumed that he was to blame. This was a wonderful allegory about the damage addiction does, not just to the individual but their loved ones too. And I recently made a video all about that, which I've linked to in the info button in the top right corner, so make sure you add that to your watch later list if you haven't already seen it. Later, Batman even sought Langstrom's help in tracking down Dr. Emile Dorian, who had kidnapped Catwoman to turn her into a human-cat hybrid. Now, I don't know that I'd go as far as saying that the Langstroms were Batman's allies, given that Batman only went to them for help once, but he had saved them from themselves, so they were more than willing to help him out. Once the Langstrom story had been told, they didn't really get used all that much. There may be other reasons, perhaps the transformation scenes were too expensive to animate, but ultimately their story was complete and they didn't need to keep coming back. And perhaps that's fitting. Beatas treated Man-Bat as a metaphor, not just a menace. Once the addiction was confronted, the horror lost its hold. 2004's The Batman took Langstrom back to his earliest roots, a man who wanted to rival Batman, but recast that ambition as madness. The comic book version had good intentions, and he was horrified when he became a monster. The Batman's Langstrom set out to become a beast from the start. His debut episode, The Man Who Would Be Bat, a clever nod to Kipling's The Man Who Would Be King, a story of men who tried to wear crowns they hadn't earned. Langstrom's story is much the same. He wanted to rule the night, but he only revealed how small he truly was. While his background is rarely referenced in the show, there are a couple of things we can infer about him based on his appearance. There, Langstrom is short and seems to have albinism. At first I thought his white hair was just a sign of his age, but note that he has pink irises. His short stature and pallid appearance aren't flaws though, and Langstrom isn't evil because he looks unusual, but he clearly believes that his difference means he has to become something else to be respected. The real monster is his self-loathing. He was a researcher at Wayne Enterprises, allegedly researching a cure for deafness. He doesn't have a wife, but does mention a niece who is deaf, and says that she is the motivation for his research. However, this was a lie, she could hear perfectly well. Instead, he was obsessed with Batman and wanted to give himself the power to, as he put it, rule the night. Given his stature and uncommon appearance, it's not a huge leap of the imagination to think that Langstrom spent his life feeling overlooked. Perhaps he was a man of intellect who had been dismissed at first glance. His pale skin and small frame make him look fragile, almost spectral. In a world where strength and darkness command respect, you can see why he'd dream of embodying both. Becoming the Man-Bat wasn't just about power though, it was about presence. In his mind, monstrosity was a kind of validation. It was proof that he could be something greater than the frail man that people ignored. It was the fantasy of being impossible to ignore and to dominate. In a way, Langstrom's transformation is his revenge on invisibility. Where Bruce Wayne used fear to protect the innocent, Langstrom wanted to use it to finally be seen. Likewise, he wanted to replace Batman, not to fight crime, but to frighten people. He has no understanding of who Batman is or why he does what he does, and it's kind of sad to see him dedicate his life to something he just doesn't get. There are other things that set this Man-Bat apart from his predecessors. He drinks the blood of animals, and Batman fears it won't be long until he graduates to draining humans. He even spits a mucus to trap his victims, which is another grotesque flourish that blurs science with savagery. Langstrom's experiments with bats bring him to the attention of detectives Yin and Bennett, who suspect him of being Batman, and I suppose in a way they were kind of right. They could tell that there was something off about him, it just wasn't what they thought. Their dogged pursuit of Langstrom results in Bennett getting snatched, intended as Man-Bat's first human meal, but Batman intervened. This was an important act, one of several that made Bennett and Yin question if the Batman really was as dangerous as their boss said he was. Langstrom, meanwhile, had been caught before he was able to make his transformation permanent. As such, he was locked away in Arkham, and Batman took away all of his research, leaving Langstrom trying to recalculate the formula from his cell. The shot of him writing using his feet because his arms were bound in a straitjacket is incredibly revealing of his character. Sure, it's an image that makes him look insane, and yeah, it's effective, but symbolically it shows how his obsession has triumphed over his restraints. It signifies that there's almost nothing anyone can do to stop him from pursuing his dream, and it's also pretty undignified. And the indignity continued in the episode Pets, where the Penguin stole a sonic device that allowed him to control Man-Bat. Langstrom was still in his cell and hadn't been able to recreate the formula, but something in that sonic signal reactivated the remnants of the formula in his bloodstream. Or something. Langstrom is aware of everything that's happening while he's Man-Bat, and he doesn't want to be a slave, but he is compelled to follow orders, stealing money from a bank for Penguin. When he turns back to his human form, he makes it very clear to Penguin that when he gets free of his clutches, he will kill him. Fortunately for both, Batman intervenes and sends the pair back to Arkham. In Rumours, Man-Bat appears as one of the captives in Rumours' private prison for Gotham's rogues. We're not told how Langstrom became Man-Bat again, perhaps some other sonic signal triggered the transformation, but this, along with Pets, show how he has become a commodity rather than a ruler. For Penguin, he was a weapon, for Rumour, a target, and he was powerless against the two of them. Fortunately, once again, Batman intervened and freed the criminals from Rumour and sent them back to Arkham. By the show's final season, Langstrom has effectively reformed. He has no intention of ever using his formula again, it just wasn't worth the trouble. But a group of college kids steal his research and turn themselves into the Terrible Trio. What's interesting about this is that Langstrom has genuinely reformed. He did not help the trio, they stole from him, and once Batman got involved, he was more than willing to help develop an antidote that saved the day. I don't think I'd go as far as saying that this Langstrom became a hero or an ally to Batman, seeing as he only appeared once and for just a few moments. But he definitely learned his lesson. It's a quiet end for one of Batman's most striking foes, and I think it shows that there are multiple forms of power. There's the brute force that Langstrom saw as the Man-Bat, and then there's the power that comes from helping people and saving lives. Ultimately, the Batman's Man-Bat is not a significant figure, but his arc is quite interesting. He wanted dominion over the night and instead became everyone else's pawn. It's a fitting fate for a man who sought power without understanding it. Langstrom's journey through the Batman charts a steady fall from ambition to obsession, from a man to a monster, and from a ruler to a pawn. Every time he tried to seize control, he lost more of it. In the end, he learned what Batman already knew, that real strength doesn't come from transformation, but from restraint. It's just a shame that most of his character development took place off-screen. Still, his story reminds us that becoming something greater isn't about changing what you are, it's about mastering who you are. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time, I'll be back on Friday for my Halloween special, looking at one of the most disturbing episodes of Batman Beyond. Yes, it's time to talk about Earthmover. And then next Monday, now that Spooky Month is behind us, it'll be time to get to my regularly scheduled content to talk about the villain that came second in my latest Beware the Batman villain poll. Quite fittingly, it's their version of Two-Face. Hope to see you then.